So doing the whole college ministry thing, I learned a lot of phrases that I probably would have never learned otherwise. One of those is FOMO. If you've ever heard of that, FOMO, it means fear of missing out. And it's amazing the words and the phrases that these young people come up with to explain a reality that I think a lot of people experience. The basic premise of that is that there's this fear that you're going to miss something important, that you won't be invited to something, that you won't be liked, that whatever. I mean, just kind of that sentiment is encapsulated in that word FOMO, fear of missing out. And in one sense, I want to scoff and say, geez, these kids are really worried about nothing important. But I think on some level, they're really just touching at a reality that a lot of people worry about. On the other end of the spectrum, I think vividly that there is a vast ministry for those in nursing homes because of the sheer loneliness that can be present in those places at times, because they don't get to see their family very often, because maybe there's not a lot of programming for them to get involved in or whatever else, because there's injury and sickness and they just feel alone and forgotten. In the first reading, we have these widows complaining to the apostles because they are being forgotten in the daily distribution of wealth. In the early church, they held everything in common. People sold pieces of land and then brought the money and put it at the feet of the apostles, and so they were trying to take care of the wider community, and some were forgotten, which can happen far too often in the life of the church. I know Father Fred and I try the best we can to share the sacraments in particular with you all through confession and the Eucharist and sharing our time the best we can, anointing people when they're sick. But inevitably, people get missed along the way. And I'd rather that not be a reality. But I hope that the reason that you guys, all of us, come to the Mass in particular, to all the sacraments really, is because of Jesus' promise. In the Gospel reading, he talks about that he's prepared dwelling places for us. This is the Gospel reading that I'd say 80% of all the funerals I celebrate, they want to pick that as the Gospel reading because it's such a gospel of hope. You have a loved one who's just passed away. You need to hear a word of encouragement. And Jesus is saying, I have prepared a place for you. You have not been forgotten. You're not like the widows in the first reading, or somebody in a nursing home that's just not cared about, or somebody who the church has neglected for some intentional or unintentional reason. I, Jesus, have prepared a place for you, and I will show you the way to my Father. Again, I hope that that's the experience of everybody who comes here, that they feel known and loved and cared about by this community, by Father Fred and I in particular, to the best that we can. And if that's true, then I hope that you take that experience with you out into the world and share it with others, to let them know that they don't have to have FOMO. They don't have to miss out on something. They don't have to feel like they're unloved and forgotten. There's too much of that in the world. There's too much hurt and brokenness and loneliness. Ideally, the church can be a place where that is remedied through her sacraments, through her ministers, through us here gathered. I can't do it all alone. I have limited time and energy, just like every one of you do. But at least we can reach out to the circle of influence that we have and try to be love. Try to let them know that the Father has prepared a dwelling place for them, and that if they can encounter Christ over and over again, particularly for us as Catholics in the sacraments, then whenever they do close their eyes in the sleep of death one day, when they open them again, they'll know exactly where they are because they have been affirmed over and over again through life that Christ has prepared a dwelling place for them. And as we've encountered Christ over and over again in the sacraments, we know that this is the way to the Father. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He's already shown us who the Father is. So it doesn't have to even be a scary reality that we face at the end of life. Because we've been loved well, and we have loved others well. There's a reason that Christ summed up the whole law in those two great commandments of love God and love neighbor. Because really, that's the most important thing. That people know they're loved, that people ultimately find Christ. So I need you all, as you need me, to be love for one another and love for the world.